Does more sex make your marriage happier? That's what we're going to be talking about today. I am Sheila Ray Gregoire from baremarriage.com, where we like to talk about healthy, evidence-based biblical advice for your sex life and your marriage. And I am joined today by my daughter, Rebecca Lindenbach.
Hello.
Which is super weird.
Yes, we realize it's weird. We've heard it before. We get it.
Yes, to talk about sex together. But, we've researched this and we've talked about this so much that, it doesn't quite seem as weird anymore.
No, not quite. You can get used to pretty much anything. No, but we've done a ton of research into this topic. We've talked a lot about sexual health. We've looked into the determinants of a healthy sexual life in a marriage, all these things. But we're actually looking at different people's research today.
Yeah, so we've done a lot of research, but there's a bunch of studies that I want to talk about that kind of combine to try to answer this question. Does more sex make your marriage happier? Because it is kind of convoluted, and I love getting into the nitty gritty of things, of questions like that, because it is super interesting where it's not a straightforward answer.
Yes.
And so we have to dig further to figure out what's really going on.
Yeah.
And that really is our call, especially in the evangelical church, is to stop giving these pat one size fits all answers about sex, because it isn't that easy. There's more going on. So before we jump into that, I just want to say thank you to the people who support our podcast and listen to our podcast. So if you are a longtime listener, please right now, if you haven't already, rate our podcast 5 stars wherever you listen to it. It just helps other people hear about it, and consider becoming a patron.
Yes, our patrons get access to us behind the scenes through our Facebook group, and they get little bonus episodes from the podcast, like one we're going to record today, where we're going to talk for a little bit longer and
a little more unfiltered.
And a little bit more unfiltered, and that's only available for our patrons.
Yes. So you can join for as little as $5 a month or $8 a month to get the unfiltered, and that's super fun. Okay. I want to get to that research. But first, I want to give an example, or a couple of examples that we'll talk about, of the kind of ways that sex is often talked about in the evangelical church. And one of them, and this makes me uncomfortable, honestly, to give this, but I just think it's such an obvious one, and it's got more than 1 million views right now on social media. So we do need to talk about it because it's making the rounds. This is Jana Howerton, the wife of Josh Howerton, you'll see Josh in this too, talking about sex with her husband.
Candidly to the wives and husbands of Lake Point, what, Jana, do you think are things that wives need to hear about sex and marriage?
I have a lot.
Buckle up.
Okay. If you want to see some ripple effects in your marriage, first I'd say make him feel wanted. Start desiring him, pursuing him. Initiate sex with your husband. Just like the lady in Song of Solomon. She gives us an example. Women need to remember that emotional intimacy for them is going to lead to physical intimacy. But for him, physical intimacy leads him to emotional intimacy. We both need to be playing our parts and doing what we need to be doing for the other. And then you're going to improve your intimacy with one another. Women are really, really good at giving attention to the needs of everyone around them. Kids, friends, extended family, people at work. But what about your husband? You're completely exhausted and you have no time for physical intimacy or a desire for him. But you know what? If your friend calls you and is like, hey, can you go out tonight? All of a sudden, you're excited and ready to leave and energized. What kind of message does that send to him? And you are thinking he doesn't notice, he doesn't care, but he does.
Let me just say, he cares.
He cares. Marriage is the only way that he can get this. He needs it. Sex is important, and you need to make sure you're having more of it.
Okay, here's why this makes me uncomfortable. And this is really your
point. This is my pet peeve. This is my big point, which is if you hire someone to be a pastor of your church and you do not hire their spouse, and their spouse does not apply for the position, and their spouse is not hired as the teacher, I just think it's incredibly inappropriate how often pastors' wives are asked to bare their souls and their personal lives and talk about incredibly personal, intimate things simply because their husbands have a certain job. I don't think it's appropriate to be asking pastors' wives in particular, because it's mostly women who are asked to do this. Because what happens is their husband is supposed to talk on sex, and he's like, well, someone needs to talk to the women, and it would be inappropriate for me to talk with another woman, so then you're just going to have to do it, honey.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's happening with Jana and Josh. Like, obviously, we don't know, but it's a dynamic that I've seen happen so often that immediately when I see a pastor and his wife, who is not also a pastor, speaking on this, I'm always like, oh, so is she able to say no? Or has she been forced to talk about her sex life in front of millions of people now? Because they've put it on the internet. It's had like 1 million views.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that just feels incredibly inappropriate to me. It feels coercive, and it feels like one of the many ways that the way that we do church leadership is actually not healthy for the pastor's family either.
Yeah, we did a whole podcast on this where Josh and Jana actually did like an 1.5 hour long Instagram live about sex, and we talked about what was good about it, because there was some good stuff about it, and what was bad about it, and I'll put a link to that in the podcast notes below. Yeah. Actually, that Instagram live was better than this.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the big message here is he needs sex.
Yes.
And you need to give it to him no matter how you're feeling.
Which means you have to desire him. You have to initiate. If you want to be emotionally connected, you're going to have to give him sex first. Yeah. Which is, as many people have often pointed out, the exact opposite of the advice and the warnings that we give pre-marriage, right? What's one of the reasons that, Christians typically tell kids, like, hey, you shouldn't have sex until you're married. Why? Because sex can cause a false sense of intimacy.
Yes.
And so you don't want to be building intimacy based on sex, because it's not true. You need to you need to know each other first. You need to be committed to each other first. You need to be married first, and then you can allow sex to build on what's already there. Then the minute you get married, are you not intimately close? Are you not emotionally close? Do you not really know each other? Well, make sure you jump into bed.
Yeah.
It's not like our brain chemistry works differently after we're married. Like, people work the way that they work. And so if you're saying that sex can make you feel close when you're really not, when you're dating, well, guess what? Sex can make you feel close when you're really not, when you're married too.
Yeah, exactly. And that line that she had, women desire emotional intimacy before sex, and men get emotional intimacy from sex. I taught that.
Oh, everyone taught it.
Yeah, like it was a big takeaway from the original version of the Good Girl's Guide to Great Sex.
But it also is true according to the literature. Yeah. And here's the thing: it goes back to that ravioli, that ravioli research article where they found that women and men mean different things when they use the word sex, because for men it's almost always paired with an orgasm, whereas for many women it's almost never paired with an orgasm. And so it's not actually sex that you're measuring, it's pleasurable sex.
Yeah.
Because when women have orgasms at the same rate as men, they report the same things as men. And so anyway, so that's a whole different podcast that we talked about.
Yes,
but in a similar
is sex like Chef Boyardee. It was a hilarious study.
It was a great.
It was all about, when you say ravioli, are you talking about Nana's ravioli, or are you talking about Chef Boyardee?
Exactly.
And women get Chef Boyardee, and men get
Nona's handcrafted.
Yes.
Yeah. But
what one of the hardest parts of my job is? Just the impact on your faith. When we started looking into all the toxic teachings in evangelicalism and sex and marriage, I was left thinking, how could people who read the Bible do such harm and not seem to care? Like, how could God let his word be misused like that? And it really did cause me a lot of consternation for a couple of years. Well, when I read Zach Lambert's book, Better Ways to Read the Bible, it was just so comforting, because it showed me that the problem was not the Bible. The problem was the assumptions and the lenses that we have often read the Bible through. And, Zach shows the 4 harmful lenses, but also the 4 healthy lenses. And I especially love the Jesus lens. So if you haven't read Better Ways to Read the Bible yet, please get it. It's just out with Baker Books, and the link for it is in the podcast notes.
Yes.
But we're having the same situation here. Where what do we mean by emotional closeness? And what do we mean by that? Because it's not that women don't want sex. It's that women experience sex often in a different way, simply because of socialization, of how our brains work, of how our bodies work, of how much more vulnerable sex is in many ways because of the risks. So it's not that women don't want sex. It's not that like women will give sex because they feel emotionally close. It's that women really want sex, and emotional closeness is one of the ingredients to sex, even more so for women on average, right? That doesn't mean that men need to be given sex in order to feel emotionally close.
No.
It's just the question is men, like there's been a lot of studies on how like that I've seen over the years where it's like it's just that there's less risk for men in sex. And so emotional closeness is less of a requirement because men are not the ones who get pregnant.
Yeah.
Men are not the ones who have
who can have pain during sex.
Yeah,
who can be degraded in the same way during sex.
Like on average, who are an average, because men can experience all these things as well, obviously, but in the average like man-woman sexual encounter, one is at risk and the other one is not in a very profound way on the average encounter. And so that's why we see these results. So it's not that women don't want sex, and it's not that men don't need emotional connection. It's just that when you specifically look at what does it take for you to have sex, there's more cost requirements for women because of the increased risk. It's not like, let me make this very, very clear. It's not that men do not crave emotional closeness, and it's not that women do not crave sex. Women crave sex just like how men crave sex. It's just that women have more burden with sex.
Right. And sex, the word sex means different things.
Exactly.
To a lot of women, because their experience of sex is so across the board, whereas men's experience of sex tends to be pretty much the same, right? 95% of men are going to orgasm in a given sexual encounter compared to 48% of women. And there's much more coercion, male to female, than the opposite. Not that there can't be coercion,
Of course.
but
when we're talking about statistics, we're talking about averages. And so if you're not part of the average, then it doesn't apply to you. That's fine. But we are talking about averages when we talk about statistics.
But what gets me about this conversation, this is really why I wanted to use this video as an example, is her takeaway is no matter how you feel or what is going on with you, he needs it.
Yeah.
The marriage is the only place he can get it. So you have an obligation to give it. There is really nothing about the benefit of sex to you.
There's also nothing about how, hey, this is the only place you're supposed to get it too. There's no assumption that she also wants sex.
No. And then she tells a story about how there's these times where you are just exhausted. You know, you're running around with the kids. You've got to cook meals. You're just absolutely run down at the end of the day. And yet, if your girlfriend calls and says, hey, do you want to go out? You'll go, but you won't have sex with your husband. And it's like, well, maybe the girlfriend hasn't let you down. Like, why are you exhausted?
But also, maybe for this woman, maybe going out and having a time to chat with her girlfriend and connect and go look at cute things in the thrift store or whatever is a recharging activity. And for some reason, sex is not for her. And maybe she also just has had a touched out day. And she's like, yeah, if he wanted to take me out to go get coffee and go thrifting, I'd also do that with him. Yeah. I just don't want to have
sex.
Or
if he had given the kids the bath, if he had been the one to make dinner, like they don't talk about any of that. But it's just you need to bear everything, women. You need to bear the entire burden of the house, the entire burden of the kids, and you need to have sex even when you're exhausted. And it's like, that's a terrible message about sex.
It's also, what I hear when I hear Gianna talking about this is also a fundamentally different view of what a spouse is than what my experience is, but also what I think a lot of healthier marriages have experienced, which is your spouse should be someone who is on your team and is looking for the best for both of you, not someone who's just trying to make sure they're getting what they're owed. And I'll actually give an example from today. So I was diagnosed with, technically don't have anemia, but my ferritin levels are like literally like 1 point above what you get a diagnosis, and my iron levels are practically non-existent. They were like single digits. Yeah. And so we're treating I'm about to have anemia if I don't currently, right? So it's pretty bad. And this morning, Connor and I have a deal. I get up with the kids and I make them breakfast, and then Connor does bedtime because near the end of the day, I just want to sit down and read a book, and I would much rather get up early and be tired than have to keep going for longer in the day. But this morning I rolled over and it was like, 7:30 in the morning, and I was just like, I will do bedtime. Can you do breakfast? And he went up, he got them breakfast, he got them all settled. He came back and he saw that I was just completely dead to the world, and he let me sleep for another 2 hours. Wow. Right? Yeah. And he got the kids all sorted. He didn't say a single thing. And it's not like now he's owed a sleep-in day. Because that's just what you're supposed to do. Like when you see that your spouse is tired, you let them rest.
Yeah.
Like it's that simple.
Yeah.
If your spouse is tired and you can, you let them rest. It is that simple. Yeah. Right? And like we're dealing with profound levels of tiredness right now in my house, right? And it feels stupid to have to say that, but it's like if your spouse is tired, they should rest.
Yeah.
And I just see this thing with Jana and Josh, and I'm like, okay, but like, why is he seeing her as the enemy? Why is her needs, why are they the hurdle? Yeah. Why are what she needs to feel good the hurdle? Like, why is that the case? That means you're not a team. That means you're not on the same page. That means that you're just trying to get stuff from each other. And that just shouldn't be how it is.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's sad. It really is. I also think, and I really want people to understand this, okay? I want to divide libido or our approach to sex into 3 different categories.
Yes.
Okay. So when it comes to sex, we can have 3 different attitudes at the end of the day or at the middle of the day, whenever you're going to have sex. Okay.
Time.
Whatever. It doesn't matter. You can want to have sex. I'm in the mood. I want to jump you. That's great. Okay. So you can want to have sex. You can not want to have sex, but not be opposed to it. You can be like, I'm not particularly in the mood, but hey, if we have sex, I'm probably going to enjoy it. I'm probably going to sleep better. I usually have a good time. I like our marriage.
Yeah. Whereas one of those things where it's like I don't feel the need for it right now, but I know that I will become aroused and want sex when we start going. Right. That was a big category of women on our survey. We asked people about their arousal levels before they started having sex, and then we measured their feelings of satisfaction. And there's a lot of women who start sex because they were like, I wanted sex, and I was like, honey, I want sex. Great. And then there's another group of women where they had sex because they were not aroused yet, but they were confident that they would become aroused when they had sex. And those women also had super high rates of the same levels of satisfaction.
There really was no difference. Afterwards.
Does not actually matter if you have a responsive, that's like as in you respond to the initiation, or a spontaneous, which is you're kind of already there even without the initiation libido. There's not a difference in terms of your satisfaction as long as you're confident that it's going to be good once you have the sex.
Right. So again, there's I want to have sex. There's I'm not really feeling it, but I probably could feel it. And then there's I actively want to not have sex.
Yes.
Okay. So you can be like, no, I want to not have sex. It's like when my husband was a teenager, the radio station in town had this thing where you could call in and ask them to play a song. All right. And he and a group of friends every night would call in and say, I am asking you not to play Pass the Duchy on the left-hand side. Yes. Okay. and then the guy would say, okay, so I'm going to play Pass the Duchy. No. I am saying I don't want you to play it. So if someone else requests it, we are canceling out that request because we are saying we actively do not want you to play this. And that's kind of what's going on here. So there can be people who are like, yeah, I don't want sex, but if I have it, I'm probably going to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's more like if I had chosen what we were doing tonight, it probably wouldn't have been that. But because you want it, I'm like, okay, yeah, actually, why not? It's the difference of I am feeling antsy and want to go for a run because I need to burn off steam versus... Well, I said that I wanted to run more. I always feel better after I run. I'm going to feel proud of myself, and I'm going to regret if I don't do this because I'm going to waste the afternoon on the couch instead. So let's go for a run. Yeah. And then you feel great afterwards. Versus, I broke my ankle yesterday.
Yeah.
And if you make me go for a run, it's going to be worse. Or even just like, I am nauseous and I don't want to bounce around. I am exhausted. Like, then there's times where you're like, if I go for a run, it's going to actively damage the next day for me.
Exactly.
Right? So those are the 3 categories.
So this is the 3 categories. The problem is that we conflate the second 2.
Yes.
We conflate, I'm not wanting to have sex, but it'll be okay. And I actively want to not have sex.
Yeah.
Because we say to people, look, you may not want sex, but you need to realize that he needs it. And that message falls very differently to people who are, hey, I don't feel it, but I could. And to people who are like, no, I actively don't want it right now. And the problem is this conversation that Jana is having is not the conversation you should start with. This is not the lead into the sex conversation. This is the conversation that you have about sex after you have talked about how sex is supposed to be mutual, intimate, pleasurable for both. After you've talked about the orgasm gap. After you've talked about what consent looks like and how it isn't okay to use sex toys on your wife without her permission or when she tells you not to. You know, after you have said that her arousal matters and having sex when she doesn't feel good is not okay. Like you need to have all of those conversations first so that when you are talking about having sex, you mean the same thing about sex. Yeah. You mean an encounter where she is likely to have an orgasm, where they are both going to feel close to each other, where this is going to make their marriage more intimate. If that's what you're dealing with, then sure, tell people, hey, you know, this is something important. We need to prioritize it.
Yeah, you don't. And now to be very clear, the way that Jana and Josh were talking about it is never appropriate.
No.
But like the concept of talking about telling people to prioritize sex and have and try to make sure that they're not just going days and days without having sex because it just didn't pass their mind.
Weeks, whatever.
Weeks to weeks, whatever you want to do. When I say days and days, I mean like weeks and weeks. But you know, like this is the thing. Like it's one thing to have that conversation. It's never okay to say it doesn't matter how you feel, he needs it. It's never okay to phrase it as a he needs this, you need to do it for him versus a this is good for your marriage. You want to have a good sex life, so stop getting in your own way. That's a very different conversation than your spouse needs this, and so it doesn't matter how you feel.
Yeah. And that's basically what they're saying. And again, they have not in this video that they put out on the internet, they have not talked about the 47-point orgasm gap. They have not talked about how 16% of women say that their primary emotion after sex with their husband in evangelical marriages is feeling used. Right. And so, you know, they have not talked about the fact that 23% of evangelical women have experienced pain during sex, like vaginismus, and another 30% have experienced pain after childbirth. Like they have not talked about those things. And so you can't just have this conversation without explaining and without making it a foundation that sex needs to be good for her too, where she feels wanted, she feels safe, she feels intimate with him, she doesn't feel used, you know, and where it's pleasurable and she can expect an orgasm.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you just don't talk about this stuff first. And so if that is you, like if you are in that middle group where you're like, I don't really feel like sex, but maybe we have 2 courses that can help you. So first of all, if you have never reached orgasm, if you just, maybe you can get aroused, but you can't get to orgasm, or maybe you're not even sure if you're getting aroused at all, our orgasm course is really foundational and it's fun. It's based on research. It's not based on how we reach orgasm.
Ew.
We don't get gross. Like this is all based on research. Although the research you had to do was pretty disturbing.
Oh, there was probes are very common in this realm of research. I will just say, if I never have to hear the word inserted like device or whatever again, I'll be thrilled.
Yes. Anyway, so the orgasm course can help, and we also have a boost your libido course because maybe you're someone you can reach orgasm. Sex is good for you, but you just never want it. You're in that middle group.
Yeah, and you're frustrated because like I said earlier, like the idea, like I want a great sex life. I feel like I'm in my own way. Like that's a lot of I think that's a lot of women's experience where it's like I just feel like there's something that's blocking me from having what I want, and I can't figure out what it is. We work through a lot of those in the Boost Your Libido course.
Yeah, and so we will put links to both the orgasm course and the Boost Your Libido course in there. But again, I just want people to hear this, that this is what we get in the evangelical church all the time, is we get these messages that ignore that third group, that actively don't want sex, that don't examine why is it that someone may actively not want sex.
I think I actually have a different take. I don't think they're ignoring that third group at all.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think they care.
Yeah, they don't care.
I don't think they care.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference, because we've told them multiple times that the third group exists versus the second group, and they don't change what they're saying. I think they only care about making sure that men are getting enough sex.
Yeah.
And the ironic thing is, if you only care about making sure that men are getting enough sex, eventually the sex just stops altogether.
Yeah, it does.
So
okay, let's listen to another clip.
Okay.
Another take. All right. This one is from Ed Young Jr., who is a senior pastor at, I forget what church it is. I will put it in the podcast notes, and his wife, Lisa. And they're talking to a couple. I don't know who the couple is, but here we go.
It's the story of our marriage.
Oh my gosh.
That's why we wrote the book Sexperiment. It was Lisa's idea. I love it. I've been fighting her off for 40 years. I mean,
I understand the struggle. I need prayer.
And just the whole thing about the woman feeling more sexual as I get older, I've been the one that's desiring sex more.
I feel attacked.
So, we have come up with a rule, and I just want to help y'all out. 48 hours. If you decline, you got 48 hours to initiate. It's working. Because I got tired of being declined.
Yeah, now I've written about the 24-hour rule.
24.
Now, wait a minute. We need to vote on that.
What book did you read?
I think 24 hours.
Okay, so first of all, woman with a higher sex drive.
Yes, they're normalizing that women have high sex drives too. That's great.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
And as we were talking about, this advice in that situation is not terrible.
No, exactly. I think that the word rule can be triggering for a lot of people because
I don't like rules.
I'm going to be very honest. Statistically speaking, what we have found, and what other studies have also seemed to have found, but what we have found is that when the woman has the higher sex drive or they have around the same sex drive, it tends to be because sex is frankly going pretty well.
Yes.
Like women have high libidos when sex tends to be orgasmic. Obviously, there are cases where there are bad marriages where she has a high sex drive. Not saying those don't exist. Again, we're looking at statistics, so we're looking at the aggregate. We're looking at the group scores and where they tend to shift. So marriages where she has a high sex drive tend to mean this is a woman who enjoys sex, right? Mm-hmm. So in those cases, the word quote unquote rule is probably not an actual rule.
Yeah.
And I know so there's a lot of marriages where the rule was enforced, and often it's because she was coerced to have sex she didn't want to have because of the 72-hour rule, which we talked about in The Great Sex Rescue. If you haven't read The Great Sex Rescue yet, you have to read it. The 72-hour rule has a very funny story about couples trying to figure out the right frequency in there. And anyway, if you haven't read it, you should. But this idea of there being like quote unquote rules for 48 hours or 24 hours, to me, I'm going to be a very generous here, feels more like this is the general guideline that we've worked out, right? Where it's like, if you initiate, you don't have to worry about getting rejected because you know it's going to happen soon.
Yeah.
Right? That's more how I'm seeing it. However,
yes,
that advice to couples where overall they have mutually pleasurable sex is not the same if you give that advice to someone where she has never had an orgasm.
Yeah. And who is the audience that is listening to this? So here's two couples, both of them where she has the higher sex drive. And we know that in 19% of marriages, women do have the higher sex drive. Like there's nothing there. That's great. And often those marriages tend to do better too. So really that's not a bad thing. Okay. That's actually,
and again, because women's sex drives tend to be a direct result of how they are treated sexually.
Yes.
Not all the time, again, but generally.
Yeah, generally. But what everyone else in that stadium is hearing is, oh, if he initiates sex, she only has 24 hours and then she has to give it.
Yeah.
Which means he could be insisting on sex every 48 hours.
Yeah.
And that could be the rule. And she can't say no.
Yeah.
And that is a really destructive thing to say.
Yes.
It's obligation sex. Which is the most destructive belief that we measured in the Great Sex Rescue. It lowers women's orgasm rates. It's one of the biggest drivers of the increased burden of vaginismus that evangelical women suffer from. It lowers your marital satisfaction rates. It's highly correlated with abuse and marital rape. Like it's not a good thing. And so, this is it again. Having that conversation without having all that preamble is not okay.
No. And I think this is also a really great example. And I know we talk about this a lot, but every time we see it, we have to talk about it again. This is why you can't talk about sex from personal experience and why you shouldn't be teaching from personal experience, because I actually think from the very limited information that we have in this video, I think statistically speaking, it's very likely that these people have pretty happy sex lives.
Yeah.
Statistically speaking. So good for them. Good job. But that doesn't mean that you're qualified to give advice, because you might not realize what's making your sex life happy, because they seem to think that it's the frequency that's making it happy.
Yeah.
But really, it's very likely that it's mutually pleasurable, if that's the case. Like it's that both of them are maybe they both feel like they're able to trust the other person sexually, and that's also why her libido has blossomed in the marriage. Maybe this is a thing where he and she have both worked to build up the other's self-esteem and to really be your biggest cheerleader. Like, we don't know what it is from just this information, but what makes the sex life good. And it's very likely that they don't even realize what's going on either. That's not a diss. Very few of us do. That's why research is so important.
Well, yeah, like when we did our survey for the Great Sex Rescue, for the first time, I figured out the root of my vaginismus because I never realized how the obligation sex message that I was given by reading the book The Act of Marriage before we got married really impacted me. Yeah. Because my view of sex and the way that I was looking forward to it completely shifted after reading that book.
Exactly. And that's so I'm not saying that that's not a diss. That's not a, oh, silly them, they don't know. None of us know. Okay. And that's why you cannot speak from personal experience. Because I think for them, this probably has been great advice for them personally in their marriage because, again, of a different foundation than the average couple. Yeah. But they're not speaking to just them. They're speaking to a lot of average couples and a lot of worse than average couples. Yeah. And this advice of if you initiate, you get a rain check, but you're cashing in on that rain check is not cute and flirty and fun if it's a non-orgasmic marriage where there's sexual coercion and a lack of emotional closeness or safety around sex. That becomes a threat. Yeah. It's no longer a like fun, cutesy deal you guys have that's mutual. Yeah. It has now become a threat that can be leveraged against someone that, well, pastor says. Yeah.
And to put this up as a reel on Instagram where this is the only thing you're saying is really problematic. Okay, so let's turn to the research.
Yes.
Okay, because we're not supposed to talk from personal experience. We're supposed to focus on research. And there's a really good article from Psychology Today. And Psychology Today, they have some great articles and they have some really...
With Psychology Today, you just have to read the actual study because I have read a lot of Psychology Today articles where they really took one small subpoint and boy did they draw conclusions. Yeah. But this is just a good summary of the article.
And they're bringing in a whole bunch of different articles, some of which we actually quoted in the Great Sex Rescue. It's kind of cool. And actually we've used a lot of them before. So I will put links to the Psychology Today article and a lot of the articles that they quote here. Yeah. But it was actually a really good write-up. Yes. Which again, you don't always find in Psychology Today.
Yeah, so we're not, I cannot emphasize enough how much you should not blindly believe every Psychology Today article that you read.
Okay, so I'm going to read the first paragraph. Okay, so they start out, what they're basically saying is, does more sex make you happier? Yes. And they start out by sharing the studies that show yes, it does. And then they end with showing the studies that show, well, not exactly. Okay. So let me just read the first bit. In support of this, a study by Mize, Shimak, and Impat from 2016, which is the one that we cited in both Great Sex Rescue and the Marriage You Want, examined data from over 25,000 participants across multiple data sets. So that's called a meta-analysis, which we've talked about before. They found a relationship between sexual frequency, happiness, and well-being. Increasing sex to once a week produced positive results. Yeah. And then what they found is like beyond once a week, those positive results kind of dropped off. It wasn't that it wasn't better. It's just it wasn't substantially better. Yes. It's like it's substantially better once you get to once a week, and then everything else is just kind of marginal. It's not huge.
It's probably more individual versus like
And that's what we found for Great Sex Rescue too in our study. So that's kind of cool. Like we could if we had done it earlier.
Great. It's always great when you get to solidify, you get to repeat results from other studies.
And can I also say, I am like a huge fangirl of Amy Mize, who authored, was the co-author here, because she's also done the studies. She's from Toronto. She's also done the study that showed that the 5 love languages was bunk science, and she's done some great studies on desire. And so if I can have a fangirl,
if for some reason Amy Mize ever listens to this podcast, hit us up.
Yeah, we would love to work with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially because you're just down the 401. But anyway, okay, so I'll keep reading. However, additional increases did not lead to a greater effect. This suggests that moderate increases in sexual frequency may enhance perceived happiness, particularly for couples in committed relationships. Finally, Meltzer et al. From 2017 found that couples who engaged in more frequent sex reported higher marital satisfaction correlated with greater overall happiness in life. They noted that sexual activity fosters emotional closeness, which, with increased frequency, may amplify positive effects and contribute to a sense of life fulfillment.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
It does make sense.
And we found a lot of this too, right? It kind of all goes together. Like when you're happier, you have more sex. When you have more sex, you feel better about life and everything. It makes sense. Yes. Okay. Here's the counterpoint, which is really interesting. Yeah. Okay. Lowenstein et al. From 2015 moved beyond research examining positive correlations between sexual frequency and perceived happiness, and actually did experiments.
Oh, that's so
okay. Because they wanted to examine whether there actually was a causal increase in happiness. So they asked couples to change the sexual patterns in their relationship. So they said, you guys are going to do this. You guys are going to do this. And randomly, half the couples were asked to double their sexual frequency.
Yeah, which is, quite frankly, almost exactly the same advice that most evangelical sex books give.
Yes.
And what Jana was giving and everything, where it's like, just you have to have more of it.
The author's findings concluded that increased sexual frequency did not lead to an increase in happiness. One explanation they formed was that increased sexual frequency may have produced a decrease in the wanting and enjoyment of sex.
Like, well, I mean, think about it this way. Like, if you have an appetite for a certain amount of food and you're used to having 3 meals a day, and then someone starts making you eat 5 meals a day, food might start feeling bad. I know Joanna talked about that, our co-author, when she was on the gestational diabetes diet, right? And to make yourself eat a bowl of brown rice and chicken when you're not feeling hungry yet in order to maintain stable levels feels bad.
Yeah. Okay, but this is the one that I really thought was interesting. Schoenfeld et al. In 2017 found that it was sexual satisfaction rather than sexual frequency alone that was a stronger predictor of happiness.
Which makes total sense.
Yeah. So participants with more fulfilling but fewer sexual encounters tended to report higher levels of happiness and well-being than those participants who experienced more frequent but more unfulfilling sexual encounters.
Yes, that makes total sense. That makes complete sense.
Which is also what we found in our work.
Yep. And it also is, remember that if you're having fulfilling, satisfying sexual encounters, you are more likely to want them with frequency, right? This is normal. If all that you were ever given for food was like oatmeal with no sugar and no milk, just bland oatmeal, you're not going to feel as motivated to pull out lunch versus if you were going to get like a amazing grilled like Cajun chicken burger with like mushrooms and
I
haven't
had
sauce.
Lunch yet, so you're just torturing
I haven't
me.
either. I haven't either. I'm really hungry. No, but this is the thing. You know, if you know that what you're going to have is good, you're going to want it more often. So this is also why a lot of these studies find that frequency is related to happiness. Is probably because frequency is related to having good sex, which is related to having good relationship closeness, which is related.
That's the problem that Joanna has, right?
Yes.
Whenever she's analyzing our data, is that everything is related to everything else. So when you're trying to tease out what is the main thing, it is difficult.
Yes, it is.
Because when you have better sex, you want it more. When you have more sex, you're happier in your marriage. When you're happier in your marriage, you want sex more in it all.
Yeah.
Like, which is the chicken and the egg? It is difficult.
Yep.
But what this study has found is that it isn't just frequency, it's really the quality of the sex that matters most. And that's what wasn't being said in these videos.
Yeah, well, it's two things.
Yeah.
It's the quality, not the frequency. And also increasing frequency can actually decrease your desire and enjoyment.
Yeah.
So not only does this advice ignore the idea of quality, it actually makes it more likely that the sex will be bad.
Yes.
Like, just have more of it.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense, right? Sex is good when there's yearning and desire. And if you're doing it before the yearning and desire has built up, like,
now, I mean, we do need to put a caveat here, which is that the other study by Meisenals found that, like, if you do increase frequency to at least once a week, that does have huge effects.
Totally.
So in this other study where they were doing the experiment, they were increasing it like
but that's what we hear, right? We hear from every man's battle that you should have sex every day.
Oh, several times a day. It was
day.
Like 10 bowls of sexual gratification a week.
Yeah,
which is such a gross. Like, what are you talking?
But here's the thing: they're not talking about going from once a month to once a week. They're talking about people who have regular sex on average. What I hear from a lot of these books is husbands saying like it's only once a week, or it's only like, I don't know, like maybe every 4 days. And when I got married, I thought we'd be having it every day. And so the wives are saying, are encouraged, in quotation marks, to fulfill their husband's fantasy. And like, well, don't you want a good sex life defined as whatever he wants versus defined by the quality?
Yes.
And that's what we often hear is women who have sex like 4 times a week and they're like, I'm just tired.
Yeah.
They're like, and you don't give me a chance to want it. And then they're shamed for not wanting it 4 times a week. And it's like, actually, statistically speaking, about once to like a week, maybe like is pretty normal for like your desire to kind of recharge.
Yeah, which doesn't mean that like
You can't have sex more. No.
I think we found that the
like
happiest
twice a week.
couples were twice a week. Yeah, but
I also think that like, and this is Joanne and I have talked about this a lot, and we kind of want to do a study on it, but I have absolutely no idea how we ever could because of, oh my gosh, that's so much personal information. I want to track women's desire and frequency over the cycle.
Yes.
Because, like, okay, once a week is great if you have a hormone levels that just change daily, but women don't. Women have monthly hormone cycles. What if the happiest couples are having sex 7 times during ovulation and, like, once during the luteal phase and, like, 3 times in the follicular phase and none during menstruation? Or, I don't know. Like, this, I want to, like, you know what I mean? Like, maybe it averages out to, like, once to twice a week, but it's real heavy on one 4-day period. Like, I don't know, but these are all the things that go through my mind with all the research.
Right. Okay. But the takeaway from the Psychology Today article is that we need to ask the right questions.
Yes.
Okay, because often we're not asking the right questions. And that's the problem with so much evangelical sex advice is the only answer they have to everything is have more sex. Not, you know, what's the quality of sex? What's her experience with sex? Why doesn't she want sex? Because frequency, like low desire should be a symptom that should trigger curiosity, not something that triggers condemnation.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I want to talk about that idea of asking the right question as we get to the next part, which is Focus on the Family has come out with their own marriage survey that looks remarkably like ours. And they did this right after the Marriage You Want came out. They used the couple satisfaction index, so the same one that we did.
I love that all these people have started using the exact same questionnaires as we have because they've realized this. They know that our research is sound.
Yes. So
they're telling on themselves.
Yes. So let me just read this. Okay, so the survey was completed by 1,835 women and 1,973 men. While these are statistically sound representations of both sexes, it's also true that each respondent was answering questions not only for himself or herself, but also on behalf of their spouse. So they did not do like a matched pair.
Yeah,
like
they just self-reported.
They
self-reported their spouse's experience and their own. That's fine. You're allowed to do that.
Yeah. And this is significantly fewer people than we had answering ours. Okay. Plus we had like almost that number of matched pairs.
Yes.
So okay. And they're big. It's called, I'll put a link. You can actually download the report. I will put a link to it. I think it's like the State of the Family Marriage in America or something like that. I will put a link to it. And their main focus is like, do Christians have better marriages? And they found that Christians on the whole did. Lots of surveys have found this. That isn't surprising. We found this as well. You know, couples who pray together tend to do better. Like that was a big finding we talked about in the Marriage You Want. Like none of this was that surprising. But there were a few things that I want to highlight that I found interesting based on this thing about, are you asking the right questions? Yeah. So they also measured like how Christian everybody was. I think they had a 5-point scale of whether you were born again or whether you were like nothing, or I don't remember what they all were. But across all of the different categories of faith, they found that the biggest drivers of marriage problems were sexual issues was number 1.
That makes sense.
And they described it as sexual issues and frequency. Okay. The problem is they never again talked about quality of sex.
Did they not measure orgasm rates?
I don't know. They don't say a thing about it. They just say frequency.
Yeah.
Sexual issues and lack of frequency.
They don't measure whether or not the sexual issues are because, like, I don't know, even if they did measure it, they're not reporting it then.
Yeah, it's not being reported.
Yeah. So they may have measured it, but maybe they're just not willing to talk about it.
Right.
I don't know.
They just talk about how important sex is in marriage, but they don't say anything about like the quality of sex or simply the fact that it is women who are being deprived.
Yeah.
Right? Like we think about men as being deprived because we're not having enough frequency, but if you look at orgasm rates, if you look at feelings of closeness after sex, it is women who are being deprived.
Yeah.
But there's also some things in their study that I just don't think they ask the right questions.
Yeah, or maybe they have weird definitions of.
Yeah, because, and we've talked about this before too, where in our original survey for the Great Sex Rescue, we tried to ask about modesty.
Yes.
But we were trying so hard to present questions that weren't biased at all. And in fact, we got so much feedback after people did our survey of people accusing us of being complementarian.
And also then complementarians accusing us of being egals.
Which is good. Like, it means we did a good
everyone
job.
thought that we were the other side.
Right.
And
so we were trying so hard to word our modesty questions in the right way that we ended up measuring nothing.
Yep.
Because it just wasn't statistically significant, even though we knew that this is important because there's so many other studies showing how much modesty beliefs impact. So when we did our survey for She Deserves Better, we drilled down. We had multiple questions about modesty. We didn't try to do it in one.
Vague. Yeah, we made our original questions too vague. Our survey was a behemoth. It was already super long, and we didn't want to add 7 questions on modesty. We tried to put it in one.
Yeah.
And the modesty question was way too just a
and
nothing burger.
And so we just didn't we discarded it because we didn't have any findings to show. But then when we really looked at it and for the next survey,
we did it properly.
Right.
We did it more like how we did obligation sex for the Great Sex Rescue survey, because that's really the topic we were really diving into on the first one, where we had like 4 or 5 questions just on that. We did that with modesty, and we found some really cool stuff that's also echoed in the literature.
Yeah. Okay, so they did measure shared household chores, and they found that it just wasn't that important.
Oh, yes, they found it.
Okay,
important.
whereas that was one of the huge things that we tried to measure for the Marriage You Want.
And like so many studies have come out that have found that household chores and sharing household labor and inequality of the division of labor is like massive. So I wonder if they mostly surveyed, first of all, their own listeners, who are far more likely to have internalized the idea that the women are supposed to do the housework and the men aren't. And so, well, why would it be a problem? Because this is my job and I'm just failing at my job. You know, and he just doesn't see it as a problem.
Yes.
I wonder if there might be a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Or if they worded it weirdly. I don't know.
Yeah. So I mean, because we found in the Marriage You Want that household chores are 3 times more important than sexual frequency and 6 times more important than money when it comes to marital satisfaction.
Well, and there are so many studies that have found
we are backed
thing.
by have
found, well, because there's that one study that in essence found that if you have a problem with the household labor, she wants sex less because she doesn't want to have sex with a dependent.
Yeah, she thinks of you as a dependent. That was a great Australian study. Yeah. We've cited that one a lot. So it's like they just found this thing that they think doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I just find this interesting that they are trying to do a marriage survey that was so much like the Marriage You Want, but they're not asking the right questions. Yeah. They're not looking at the literature and saying, what are the big things that are being talked about in the literature about sex? What are the big things that are being talked about in the literature about marriage? And how can we measure them? And instead, they're kind of not even talking about the relevant stuff.
Well, they're doing the same thing that the evangelical church has always done about research, is they use studies to get the point they want, and they design studies to prove what they are hoping to find, rather than designing studies to measure what's actually happening and then drawing conclusions based on that.
Yeah.
Right? This is the same thing we saw in Shanti Felden's book with the For Women Only and For Men Only, where the survey questions are frankly ridiculous in how they're worded. They point you exactly towards the correct, quote unquote, answer so that she can say 87% of men say. Because it was very clear which one you're, quote unquote, supposed to choose. Yeah. Right?
And I don't think Focus did not do that with this survey.
I don't know if they did or not.
Well, I don't think they did, because they had someone external write it and they were using the CSI scale.
So did Shanti. Okay. This is the thing. You are able to do this in so many different ways. You could just simply fail to ask the questions that would disprove your hypothesis. Yeah. You can simply fail to put in control questions. You can simply only ask questions in a vague way so that if people have even any doubt, they have to say the thing that you wanted them to say. Like, for example, if for housework, you could ask a question like, have you ever considered divorcing your spouse over housework? And then they could say, well, it must not be a big problem then. Like, I don't know what the question was that they used, but there's all sorts of ways you can do this that prove what you want to see. Yeah. And still say I did it through research. Yeah. And that's why we've been so upfront about how we've done our studies. That's why we've always had experts looking at what we're doing. We've submitted for peer review. We've been accepted. We are peer reviewed.
We put our data sets up so that other people can use our data sets.
Yes. And we've always not just said our findings, but also said what our questions were. We've been very upfront. And it's because we want to be clear that we were not doing exactly that, where we weren't just creating a survey to find what we wanted to find. We wanted to create surveys that actually were accurate, reliable narrators of women's experiences in the church, and we can draw conclusions based on their experience, not ask questions that tell them to report the experience that we think they already have.
Yeah. The other big thing that is found in the marriage literature is that women's marital satisfaction is far lower than men's.
Yep.
Almost all studies find this. Ours did. We've talked about some of them on this podcast. In their report, they don't even talk about the gender differences.
Yeah.
And that's just a huge glaring thing. And I just wonder if they don't talk about that because it doesn't further their narrative.
Yeah. It's too pricey to acknowledge.
Yeah. So anyway, so when you ask the question, does more sex make you happier? I think we need to take a step back and say, what kind of sex are we talking about? What is her experience of sex?
What does more mean?
Yeah.
Are we already doing it 3 times a week? Gosh darn, give each other a break. Don't get blisters.
Yes, exactly. What is their marital satisfaction like? What is just the facts on the ground? Do they have 6-month-old triplets, right? What are the facts on the ground? We need to be asking more questions instead of just jumping right in with sexual frequency as the main problem and which is what focus tended to do with this. And the main way that we correct things is just by telling women to have more sex. And it's no, it's not that easy. Research shows it's not that easy. Our books show it's not that easy. And if you want a better sex life, we need to ask better questions. Yeah. And so that's what we want to encourage you to do. We've got the links to the studies in the podcast notes. We've got the links to the Great Sex Rescue in the podcast notes, to the Marriage You Want, to, of course, our Boost Your Libido and Orgasm courses. And hopefully, hey, we can all be having frequent great sex because we genuinely want it.
Yeah.
And that would be wonderful. So thank you for joining us on the Bare Marriage Podcast. Next Monday, something exciting is happening. So we are starting our annual huge sale for our puberty course, our sex and puberty course for kids. It's called The Whole Story. And you created it. Do you want to tell people?
Yeah. So we wanted to create a product to help parents have these really awkward conversations. So we on the screen are the ones actually explaining the brass tacks of what's going on.
And by we, you mean you?
Me, my sister, it also does the girls' version with me. And then for the boys' version, it's my husband, Connor, and a longtime friend of ours and medical student, Daniel Barrows. So there's 4 people who are going to be telling your kids the nitty-gritty stuff. We talk about very basic kind of just facts on the ground for the younger version of the course, which is your preteen years. And then when you talk to the teenagers in the high school years, we get a lot into those tricky social kind of situations as well, and how to handle this when there's nuance here and there's tricky questions, and some families are going to have different rules than yours, and what do you do about that? And we talk about all this stuff and help you have the conversations that are hard to start. Because really, when we made this, we didn't want it to be a replacement. This isn't something where you're going to stick your kid in front of a screen that you never have to talk to them again. Absolutely not. This is a resource for parents so you can have those really tough conversations without feeling like a deer frozen in headlights, being like, I don't know, did I say what a fallopian tube was? Did I explain what an erection is? You don't have to worry about any of that stuff, because I know it can be panic inducing. It can make you freeze, especially if you're someone who grew up with weird feelings about sex, or who in a family where it wasn't talked about. And so this is a video course you'll go through with your kids. There's activities, there's discussion questions, and there's all sorts of information so that you can know that your kids have a really good foundation of sex education that you can then continue the conversations as they grow and as the questions come up, so that you can make sure they know everything. They know the whole story about sex, puberty, and growing up. And
that's going to be on sale as of Monday. But because you're listening to this now, we're going to give you a coupon code. If you use the word podcast in the coupon box, you're going to get that sale price even right now. So we'll be sending out all the details on Monday, but you can get the complete girls version or the complete boys version for $10 off, or you can get the complete boys and girls version together for $30 off. So that's starting Monday, but you can use the coupon code podcast. And of course, please check out Zach Lambert's book that I was talking about earlier in the podcast, Better Ways to Read the Bible. It is beautiful. It will change your view of scripture, and it will make you feel like God truly sees you and he loves you and he's giving you a hug and he cares about you, as opposed to you're always a big fat failure. God is not a magazine cover in the sky who's angry at you. So check out Better Ways to Read the Bible. It's lovely. And we will see you again next week on the Bare Marriage Podcast. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.